Hello and welcome to the Check-In, where we gather each weekday for community connection and conversation over the airwaves. Thank you for checking in with us today. As businesses in mid-Missouri begin to reopen, we are all moving cautiously and optimistically toward a way forward into the new normal. And the first places many of us want to return to are our vibrant small businesses. You know the ones, the independent stores, restaurants, bookshops, barbecue shacks that breathe life into our college town here in Columbia and also in our main streets in towns across mid-Missouri, town squares in Fulton, Moberly, Mexico, and, small businesses on the outskirts and many of these places. We all know this crisis has wreaked havoc on all of these small businesses. So how are they doing? How are they surviving? Today we're checking in with three people working on the front lines with small business improvement and development in Columbia for a health check on the challenges and resources out there for our small businesses and entrepreneurs as they consider reopening and move toward reopening. Our guests today are Jim Witt. Jim is the director of the Supplier Diversity Program for the City of Columbia. Jim Witt, welcome to the Check-In.
Well, thank you and welcome. Glad to be here at the Check-In.
Thank you, Jim. Nice to talk with you. We're also talking with Carrie Gartner. Carrie is the executive director of the Business Loop Community Improvement District. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, Janet. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Carrie. Nice to have you. And we also have Randy Cole. Randy directs the City of Columbia's housing programs. Hello and welcome to the Check-In, Randy.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
All right. And let me just remind our listeners, you can join the discussion if you're a small business owner in mid-Missouri. Let us know how you're coming through. Did you manage to navigate that process and get a Paycheck Protection Program loan? We'd love to hear from you if you managed to do that or if you tried and it didn't work, or have you found other workarounds, which seems likely, or maybe not. Maybe you're reopening, considering the process. Maybe you've already reopened and been open about a week. How is that going? First, let me get a general overview from each of you. You're each working with local small business owners and entrepreneurs. What are you hearing right now about the challenges and the workarounds that they're finding during this crisis? Carrie, let's start with you.
Yeah, it's been quite a few months for our businesses. And like all businesses, they really work to pivot in ways to ensure the safety of their customers and their employees, yet still remain open. And I'm saying that because we have a lot of essential businesses on the street. So grocery stores, we have a lot of drive-throughs, even home improvement stores are considered, or repair shops are considered essential. So a lot of the trick was, how do we make sure that we can get the word out on what businesses are open and what they're doing as a way to ensure some no contact sales or no contact services? Mm-hmm. So I think we've been hanging in there. I can say what's been a bright spot is, since everyone's been quarantined at home, everyone wants their home to look good. So whether we've got stores selling plants or home improvement or tools, those have been really popular lately.
Okay. And Carrie, you have about 170 businesses, I believe, at one count, involved with the Business CID. Has that number gone down? Have you lost some, or are people, as far as you know, hanging in there?
So right now, we're hanging in there.
Okay.
And I know this is something I've been working with Randy and Jim on. We do not know what the long-term effects will be. And so we expect delayed impacts of COVID. So we might be hanging on right now. The question is, how do we help those businesses who might feel that impact 2 or 3 months down the road?
All right. Well, let me bring in Jim and Randy. Jim, what are you hearing from the business owners and some of them as part of the minority business owners coalitions that you work with? What are you hearing from them?
Well, first of all, I want to echo everything that Carrie has said because I'm hearing the same thing. Second, I think there's been a national discussion about the impact on very small mom and pop and minority-owned businesses that this COVID-19 has had a fairly devastating impact. Locally, I think we're seeing pretty much the same thing. We do have a resilient group of minority-owned businesses here in our community, and a lot of them are in, the essential services. We have a number of businesses that's focused on, cleaning and, commercial and residential cleaning and things like that. Some of these businesses have been able to prosper through, COVID-19 because there's a need for their services.
Right.
I did a survey of minority-owned businesses,
okay.
and what I found is that pretty close to 40% applied for the PPP loans, and none of them received a loan.
Oh, wow.
So we had zero. Now, that's just a survey, and I don't know whether that represents, the majority of minority-owned businesses, throughout our community. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, that would be great to know. What was that percentage again, Jim, that you said?
About 40% of the businesses that I surveyed did apply for the PP.
Okay.
And the ones that responded to my survey, as of today, none of them have received a loan or anything like that.
Well, I know getting through that application is an achievement, so that's no small thing that, good 40%.
Yeah, I found that there were problems getting through the application. Some didn't apply because they didn't think that they could, get the loan. The ones that did apply haven't heard back, whether they've received the loan or not. And so we haven't seen any, positive results from my survey, but that does not necessarily represent everybody. I'm sure that there's minority-owned businesses locally that receive the loan. One thing that I would like to point out to to everyone, when you apply for the PPE loan, there was no way to desegregate those numbers, and to identify yourself as a minority-owned business. So when the loans came back, you're just going to have a number, and out of that number, we really can't tell, what the percentage is of minority-owned businesses that receive that. And even the banks that process the loans did not keep that information. So we're going to have to look back after this, at some point in time, and really see how effective that program was in terms of getting down to the smaller women and minority-owned businesses within.
Yes.
And that's a national discussion, by the way.
Yes, that sounds like a really good national discussion, and it's good to hear from you on this, Jim, and that you're tracking these things. Randy, let's bring you into this. You're working on the front lines of a few things. You're usually working on housing for the city, but you have also been working with some of the small businesses. Let me just get the general overview from you as well. What are you seeing and hearing from business owners that you're working with?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've had a lot of help from people like Jim and Carrie and others in our community that have reached out to us. We've got a lot of help from our local community banks as well, helping my team rethink how we can respond to local needs. As you said, we typically work with mainly affordable housing every year. That usually makes up about 60% of our budget. But my team and I, when the community and the nation started being impacted by this crisis, we had a conversation. I was looking back on May 24th as what are some tools under our supervision through the Community Development Block Grant Program that we maybe haven't accessed or haven't fully accessed in the past that could help respond to the really big economic needs impacting our local small businesses. And we formulated a program, a micro-enterprise program, where we provided forgivable loans to very small businesses, and we crafted it in a way to help really provide direct assistance to a lot of the really small businesses that Jim mentioned that likely weren't going to qualify or get the PPP funding. So we put that together and rolled out some previous unexpended funds that we had available, about $90,000. So we helped 18 businesses, which was good. It's definitely a small splash in the realm of need. But we certainly tracked, built into our application process, tracking minority and women-owned businesses, and we had some success reaching out to some of that population through the help of Jim Witt and Reddy and the Chamber, as well as some non-traditional connections to the African American community that might not be, connected to the Ready or Chamber. And we had 4 of the 18 that were minority-owned businesses. 6 were women-owned, so we had a pretty good response rate. But definitely we found out, we've concluded that we need to do more. So we have a couple other funding rounds coming up in July and later this summer through the microenterprise program. And we've also crafted an additional program called the Small Business Recovery Loan Program, which will help a little bit bigger but still small businesses. And we're going to do a lot of proactive outreach through Jim Witt, some partners at the NAACP, and other local partners to make sure we really get the word out to our minority-owned businesses. So,
all right.
In short, the need that we're seeing is a high demand for our services. We opened our application period at 8 in the morning on a Wednesday, and we had to close it down by noon just because the demand was so high. So I would anticipate that going forward.
All right. There's a lot to unpack there. I want to hear about the way forward on these 2 micro enterprise loan initiatives. Let me just remind our listeners, this is the check-in, and we're talking about the health of our small businesses and how they're navigating this crisis as small business owners and entrepreneurs, specifically women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. We're talking with Carrie Gartner, Executive Director of the Business Loop Community Improvement District, also Jim Witt, Director of the City of Columbia's Supplier Diversity Program, and Randy Cole, who's the city's housing programs manager, but also working on the front lines with some of these micro enterprise loans. Actually, before we get on to the micro enterprise loans, I really want to hear more about that, and I think probably a lot of our listeners do too. I just want to go backward a little bit to this Paycheck Protection Program that seemed to be very difficult to navigate and also to track who was applying for this and who wasn't. Carrie, did you hear from anyone? We heard from Jim on what some of his networks look like, and Randy's finding workarounds that are local initiatives. Yeah. Carrie, do you have anything to add to this, or did you hear anything on this process and how our local businesses were able to do?
Yeah, it was, the goal was to push money out as quickly as possible. And I think there was a lot of, confusion about how that would work. I know a lot of banks stepped in and were very helpful. I know that Missouri Women's Business Center and the Missouri Small Business Development Center who are both business counseling offices, were super helpful in making that happen. It was limited in a number of ways. A lot of people were not eligible for it, and I know that's why Randy was able to step in and really help as much as he could with city CDBG funds. So it wasn't a perfect process. There were people who didn't get it and who are struggling as a result. We did work to direct them to different types of government assistance, but in times like this, it's never really enough, is it? Mm-hmm. Everyone's working so hard at pivoting and trying to keep open, with the hope that if they can keep open for 3 months, maybe they'll be fine.
Right. Let's bring another voice into the mix. Let me bring in Nikki Davis from the Downtown Community Improvement District. Nikki, thanks for joining us. What are you hearing from small businesses right now, either about the Paycheck Protection Program, whether any of them were able to get any relief from that in your network, and what they're doing, what workarounds they're finding?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So we did do a survey to our businesses, and of the ones that answered the survey, about 61% did get the PPP or the EIDL loan or SBA loan. But there's also another good percent that had applied for it and has not received anything or even heard anything back about it. Okay. So it's kind of interesting to watch and see how what the differences are, where it's kind of going wrong, so to speak. But a lot of that has to do with this ever-changing information on all of them. Even the banks themselves are having issues trying to understand. But, There's been lots of classes, and like Carrie said, that lots of good governmental institutions that are trying to reach out and help.
Okay.
But again, it's like Carrie said, it's not going to be enough. We do definitely need to continue working with our city, with Randy, and helping our businesses find those gap fundings.
Well, let me go to Randy. You mentioned the community development block grants response with micro enterprise loans, and then also this new project that you're talking about, an initiative, the Small Business Recovery Loan with some July funding rounds. I'm sure Nikki and other callers and all the businesses in our networks and our listeners are interested in hearing more about that. What is the amount of funding likely to be in that pool, Randy, and how can businesses participate in those July funding rounds?
Yeah, sure. So for the Small Business Recovery Loan Program, the council has approved funding for that program in the amount of $400,000 total. We're going to provide the assistance in $15,000 increments in forgivable loans, so that would equate to about 26 businesses. We are going back before council on our application process at the next council meeting. We have a very thoughtful mayor and city council that thought it would be good to look at doing some prioritization that also relates to Jim Witt's comments about minority-owned businesses. So we're looking at we have a scoring criteria put together for minority and women-owned businesses, gaining a point, as well as providing some incentive and encouragement from a policy standpoint for businesses to invest at least a portion of those dollars into making their business more resilient as it relates to the pandemic. If that means investing in a greater online web presence, reconfigured space, or safety and training materials for staff or personal protective equipment. So I think that's something good to look forward to.
All right.
As far as our micro enterprise program,
yes.
Right now our commission, the Housing Community Development Commission, voted to recommend another $200,000 to that program. So that would be loans of $5,000 increments. So that would be 40 businesses. That still needs to go back before council. Here, I think it'll be at the July 6th meeting, so we'll hear what they have to say and when they weigh in.
All right. Thanks for that.
And here's something that, Janet, here's something that's really important to know, and I talk to colleagues all over the nation. The fact that a city our size is doing a program like this is very rare. You look at cities like New York or Los Angeles, and they are using these type of funds to do emergency relief loans to businesses. Cities our size are not doing that. So it says a lot about Randy, the folks in his office, and the city council for approving this, that this type of relief is just unheard of for a city our size.
All right. Let me remind our listeners that you're on the check-in on KBIA. Thanks for checking in with us. And we're talking about navigating the crisis as a small business owner, some resources, some micro-enterprise loans that are out there and becoming available for you. We're talking with our city housing manager, Randy Cole, who's on the forefront of some of these resources. We're also talking to the City of Columbia's Director of Supplier Diversity, Mr. Jim Witt. And we're talking to Carrie Gartner, the Business Loop Community Improvement District Director. Nikki, while we have you on the line with the Downtown Community Improvement District, Nikki, what do you think your business owners need to hear and need to see from these kinds of, as Carrie said, very rare, but city initiatives that are coming together?
The first thing that I think we're all trying to figure out how to do best is communication. How do we find out about it?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make sure that they have the appropriate information in a timely manner?
Okay.
And I think we've been helping them with that, and the more we are doing it, the better it is getting. But a continued influx of funds is the most important thing, and then making sure they have the information.
Okay, that's a great point. Nikki, thank you so much for calling in and joining the discussion today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Randy, to Nikki's point, it's all about the communication. You mentioned that a little bit. We have these business improvement districts. Carrie is running them. one of them, Nikki's running one of them. Do you worry that there are businesses that are out of the loop, so to speak? And how are you going to keep the messages out there to all of the small businesses?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a concern for me and my staff as well as our city council. But we've had a lot of support from our partners like Nikki Davis and Carrie and Jim Witt. My staff and I did some public engagement meetings back April 21st and 22nd. They were more broad. We just had the general public come in and share their experience of what they're going through with the impact of the disaster and how they think the city should be responding and what our priorities need to be. And we did those via Zoom, so that was the first time we've ever done public engagement in that manner. But we had a lot of value out of that. We had some local leaders, including Nikki Davis, Mary Ratliff with the NAACP, Keith McIver with Men's Minority Network, Annabelle Simmons, and a few others that expressed a desire to do more outreach to minority-owned businesses that maybe aren't connected to some of those more traditional business entities or support entities like business improvement districts. And we had a great follow-up meeting as a smaller group with those individuals, including Jim Witt, and we talked about what are some strategies that we can do to help do outreach to those organizations that might not be connected to those more traditional routes. And what we landed on, it seems to be the answer to almost every problem that I've ran into that we have public policy-wise. It means we just have to do a whole lot of more very intentional, very challenging, disciplined work. And basically, we're going to get a group of volunteers that include some of the people I mentioned and go through Jim Witt's diversity supplier list of 300 minority-owned businesses and make sure each one of those businesses on that list has a personal call or in-person meeting to explain what resources are becoming available and how they can access it. Because I think there's no real magic communication media or slogan or branding that'll get it done. It's just going to be just very intentional, disciplined, hard work and making sure we're being thoughtful and meeting people where they're at and getting them into our process.
Yeah, all right. Jim, you're the expert on this. You are managing this network of, as Randy says, more than 300 minority-owned businesses. Do you worry about this challenge of some that might not be in the loop and being able to make sure we hit everyone and that everyone knows what the resources are that are out there?
I really appreciate the work that Randy is doing and the work that we're going to be doing together to identify, these businesses and get messages to these businesses. And I think that that's very, very, important. One of the things I want to mention is that, prior to, COVID, we started the Sharp End Entrepreneurial Development Fund. It's a small fund, but, we targeted, women and minority-owned businesses. Our first round, we did about $20,000 and about anywhere from $500 to $2,000 in grants, and our grants were targeted. In other words, they were not to be used for operating funds, but targeted in a way that could help businesses either enter a new market, management development programs, buy specific equipment that's needed to enter a new market, and we found that to be very, very successful. Okay. It was a pre-COVID-19 initiative. COVID-19 has hit, and that's going to kind of change our strategy. But we're going to continue the program. It's a small program, but it's been, the 10 companies that we're working with, we feel that it's been very, very effective in helping them to enter new markets and transition through the COVID-19.
Okay.
And stay in business. And so we're going to do it again sometime late in June, Okay. We'll do it again, and we'll do another 20,000, and maybe in the fall another 20,000.
Good to know. Okay, thank you. Jim Witt is on the line. He's with the City of Columbia's Supplier Diversity Program. We're also talking with Randy Cole from the City of Columbia and Carrie Gartner with the Business Loop Community Improvement District. You can join our discussion. We've just got a few more minutes. We have Tammy calling from Jefferson City. Tammy, thanks for calling. What's your question or comment for us?
Well, I just wanted to give a